Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Endeavor podcast and video show. I'm your host, Jason Breikoff. With me once again is Dr. Wanda Montañez. Hey Doc, how you doing? What's up?
I'm doing okay. How are you, Jason?
I'm doing all right. So thank you, Wanda, for coming back for another episode.
Of
I always
course.
love having you on. For those listening at home who may not have heard Wanda's previous episodes, Wanda is a college counselor and former college admissions officer and an overall expert in the college admissions process, which is why I love having her on because I get to talk about college admissions and ask questions about topics about which I don't know a lot, and sometimes talk about stuff that I do know a lot about, and I know quite a bit about our topic today, so I'm very excited. Today we're talking about the community college advantage. So Wanda, what does that mean? What is, in your opinion, the community college advantage?
Well, I think when we talk about college, I think oftentimes the image that's created is the traditional pathway of going to a four-year college, university, graduating, and life is great. But I think that what's missing in the conversation that could really be super beneficial for a large population of the kids that we work with is this notion of starting at a community college and starting your academic pathway there, and then either transferring to a four-year college or not. And just being able to think of success in a different way.
So for folks listening at home who might not be familiar, what is a community college? What is it?
So a community college is essentially a college where a student can earn either a certificate or an associate's degree within usually 2 years or less.
So community colleges, in my experience, are full colleges, but they're not necessarily the same as the traditional Ivy wall covered four-year school. They're often found in urban environments, but not always. Sometimes in suburban environments in an area that is underserved population, and basically they're sometimes known as two-year schools. Where I grew up in New Jersey, they're called county colleges because they're sponsored by each individual county as opposed to a community of towns. They're state schools just like UMass, UMichigan, Rutgers, Penn State. So they're public colleges, but they don't give out bachelor's degrees, that four-year degree, and they certainly don't give out advanced degrees like master's or PhDs. They do give out, as Wanda just said, certificates or associate's degrees, and that's usually enough to get you started on the path. So what would be a good situation for a student to choose to attend a community college?
I think that there are different situations that a community college pathway would be a good option for a student. I think one is for sure just the overall cost of a traditional four-year college pathway. Oftentimes a community college will cost significantly less than a traditional four-year college. And for many students, even students who are financially well off, the thought of giving any institution $50,000 a year seems like something they don't want to do. So for sure, the cost of a community college versus that of a traditional four-year is something that is beneficial to students. I also think that the notion of particular career education programs that are offered at a community college are often not found at a traditional four-year college or university. So for example, if a student was interested in being a vet tech, or if the student was interested in being a dental hygienist, usually the two-year colleges are really where the bulk of that education takes place versus a four-year college. And then I think the other piece is this notion of just accessibility. To our earlier points earlier, is that a community college is literally available to any student, regardless of age, sex, gender, etc., etc. So I think that's also another reason why students choose to go to a 2-year college, is because of this notion of accessibility. I can take night classes if I wanted to, and I could work full time. You can also do that at a traditional 4-year college, but it's probably going to be a little bit more complicated.
Right, I know what you mean. And to go back to what you were saying before, the cost difference is significant. As you mentioned, the average 4-year university these days costs around $50,000 a year, whether you're talking about the Harvards and Yales of the world in the Ivy Leagues, other top-tier colleges like Georgetown, University of Chicago, Brandeis, Stanford, through state schools. Even state schools that have lowered tuition for in-state students will often make up that lower tuition through increased fees, room, board, so that the college experience is $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year, where a community college may cost $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 a year because you're paying by the class. And you can spread it out more than the 2 years. You can take classes over the summer to spread out the cost, and the cost would be a lot less. Another thing that you were saying was about the programs. You mentioned a dental hygienist, vet tech. A lot of those programs are at community colleges, and I know the local ones to where we are here in Massachusetts, those are very common and popular programs, but also a lot of programs for careers where people don't think of college as part of that path. Firefighter, police officer, things of that nature, where students will take criminal justice classes if they're going to be a police officer, instead of going to the traditional police academy,
right,
where students will take the classes in the science of firefighting to get a certificate to be a firefighter. Things of that nature, or folks who are already working out in the world, working in retail, and they want to go for a job as a manager at the clothing store or Starbucks where they're working, might take business classes at a local community college to get some credits, some college level credits to help them get that job or get that promotion. So there's a lot of opportunities in terms of the programs, and then that leads into what you were saying about accessibility with, if you're just looking for 1 or 2 classes where you're not necessarily looking for a degree, you can't do that at a traditional 4-year university or college. You can't go to Wellesley or Bryn Mawr or Occidental College and take a class.
Right.
It's just, you have to be accepted into the university. There's an entire application process, and most community colleges have both rolling admission and open admission. And can you explain what those concepts are to folks at home who might not be aware of those concepts?
Rolling admissions and what was the other one?
The open admission.
And open admissions, yeah, sure. So community colleges tend to have an open admissions and a rolling admissions policy, where, so the difference is, I guess, with regards to meeting deadlines. So open admissions basically means that if a student applies to a community college, they will be accepted. It essentially means that every student who applies will be accepted, and then the differentiation really happens in the choosing of the classes. So for example, if a student is pretty well versed in English, then they would take the English test and probably place at a higher level class than someone who is, say, English is their second language. So that would be an open enrollment. And then the other one was rolling admissions. And this actually, rolling admissions also happens at 4-year colleges, where students can essentially apply literally up until the first day of classes, and get a decision and then start rather immediately.
Right, and the thing about rolling admissions is, although community colleges are well known for that, in other words, you could sign up at any time and just start classes at the beginning of a semester, and this is in juxtaposition to competitive 4-year colleges where there's an application deadline, there's that whole process of getting that skinny or fat envelope, that
right,
myth, as it were, and then matriculating and starting with orientation that late summer, and the school year starts in the fall. That college experience, that's the mythical college experience. When I was applying to graduate school for my MED, even though it was a competitive admissions process, it was still considered rolling in that they didn't have a deadline. that if you were qualified, they would accept you up until the last second because they were trying to fill out their cohort
Correct.
for their graduate class. So many schools, even prestigious competitive schools, have rolling admission. It's not unique to community colleges, although community colleges only have rolling admissions as opposed to competitive admissions.
Right. Absolutely.
So, one thing I want to talk about is the using community colleges as a launching pad to the four-year college experience. I have a lot of experience with that as an instructor and staff member. I worked at a community college. I don't know if I've talked about this on the pod before, but I worked at a place called North Shore Community College for 2 years. It's got campuses in Lynn, Massachusetts, Danvers, Massachusetts, and a satellite campus in Beverly, Massachusetts. I loved my time there. It was a good job and a great experience. And one of the things that I experienced there as an instructor and as a staff member in the student life department was I had a lot of students who went to community college either because they weren't quite sure what they wanted to do yet, or knew what they wanted to do but knew they couldn't afford 4 years of a four-year college, came to North Shore for 2 or 3 years, and then transferred to the four-year university of their choice. Is that something that you see a lot happening with students?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the common things about community colleges that people are not aware of is that many, if not all, community colleges have articulation agreements with area colleges and universities for either particular programs or simply just in general. Meaning that if a student enters a community college and they complete either a required course of classes, or if they complete a full associate's degree, that there's an easier in to a traditional four-year college if the community college and that particular college have an articulation agreement, which basically says the four-year college is making a commitment to accepting any of the two-year college students as long as they complete certain criteria or certain credits or something like that. So, for example, nursing is a very popular major, and we have a local community college here that has an articulation agreement with one of our state colleges. And so what happens is that a lot of times our students are not accepted into the four-year track program at the state university because it's super competitive. So then students choose the two-year track because they know that the articulation agreement exists, and then it gives them an in into the college and university after completing, again, a set number of credits.
Right. I've had the experience with students with whom I've worked who went to community college for 2 years and basically took the general requirements. They took that basic freshman writing class. They took a basic math class, a basic science class, a basic history class, and got that out of the way so that when they applied to the major university of their choice, one example I can think of is a student of mine who attended North Shore, took classes that I offered. I had a class that I taught on Intro to Theater, and that was a creative arts requirement. So the student took that class with the others. He finished his 2 years and applied to Alfred University in upstate New York. And when he was accepted to Alfred, he basically had his requirement classes, the core requirement classes, out of the way, and he could focus on his major for those 2+ years where he was a student at Alfred, really get the most out of the school and save a lot of money on what would have been basic classes that he, as we could see, could take anywhere. Freshman writing class, right. And getting it done at the local school where he could live at home, commute to school, pay a fraction of the cost, have a job and save up some money so when he goes to a school that's in a more rural environment and there are fewer job opportunities, he doesn't have to worry about scraping by and getting a job at McDonald's. So I think that was a good choice for that student, and he went on to a successful career in his topic of choice.
Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to point out as you were talking is one thing I wanted to mention is if a student is eligible for financial aid, that financial aid is also something that they can use at a local community college. And oftentimes the state and federal financial aid that a student will qualify for essentially pays for the full cost of a semester or even a year at a community college. So when you talk about the savings associated with a 2-year college versus a traditional 4-year college, there's definitely some savings that students can take part in. In Massachusetts, the notion of starting at a 2-year and transferring is something that the state is very much supportive of. There's a 2+2 program where students can begin at a 2-year college or a 2-year community college. And if they graduate with a certain GPA, they're able to attend their last 2 years at a state college or university for free or low cost. I can't really remember which one it is, but there's significant savings in a student completing a 4-year degree if they choose the 2+2 option versus the traditional 4-year college option from jump.
I think community college can be a great option for a lot of students. I mean, if you get accepted to Stanford University and they offer you a free ride, there's no reason not to go. Go ahead. Right. That's great. Have that 4-year college experience, but for a lot of students that may not be an option. You might have come out of college, out of high school, like I did, with a GPA that probably didn't live up to your potential for various reasons. I mean, I've mentioned on the podcast before that I had a really rough freshman year due to family illness. My dad had a massive heart attack my freshman year, and I spent a lot of time the first half of the year in the hospital with him. My grades really suffered because of that. And him in the hospital as the old school traditional breadwinner, changed our lifestyle for a while before he recovered, and that really had a huge impact on my academic performance freshman year, and that hurt my GPA. So I came out of high school, going into undergrad, probably with a GPA lower than I might otherwise have had. A lot of students have that situation, and using that freshman year at a low-cost local state school or community college to really pump up those grades and use that as a tool for transferring to the 4-year college of your choice, that might be a great option for a lot of students.
Yeah, absolutely.
And other students may not know what they want to do and want to take some time to get those requirements out of the way before deciding where they want to go. Other students might want to use a program like Wanda talked about with the nursing program to build up their experience and their reputation and transfer to a school that has a relationship with the community college. So there's a lot of options there, and I think that's community colleges get a bad rap, in my opinion. There are some public figures who've spoken down about them. I've heard people dismiss them as nothing more than 13th grade. Mm-hmm. And I, having worked at one and having worked with a lot of students who attend community colleges, I feel that's a bad rap. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to focus on that in this episode. Any other final thoughts on community colleges before we wrap up today, Wanda?
I don't think so.
All right, then. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate having you on, especially on a topic that I feel so passionate about. If you've liked this episode of the podcast, please share us, like us, or rate us in whatever podcast listening app you use. You can also leave a comment on iTunes and especially on our Twitter page @EndeavorPod. If you're watching the video show, I hope you enjoyed the amazing graphics that our team came up with because we recorded this as an audio podcast. And please leave a comment, like us, or share us on YouTube. And if you have any questions, again, hit that Twitter feed @EndeavorPod. I'm happy to answer any questions. In the meanwhile, though, let's all keep learning.